Hey everyone, and welcome to another recording of Our Human Experience, the podcast where we probe individuals to share the stories that made them who they are today.
And try to find the connection that is our human experience. And we are recording today in beautiful Babinda at the Arts Nexus podcast studio. I'm Claire Tierney.
And I'm Anna Winter.
So where can they follow us, Anna?
They can follow us on social media at Our Human Experience on Instagram and Facebook.
ourhumanexperience.com.au. We invite you
to pod binge
Our Human Experience
anytime you like.
Today's episode is brought to you on the country of Wandjammarja in the Yindinji land of Far North Queensland, south of Cairns, in the village of Babinda. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, past, present, and those exciting new future leaders coming forward. Thank you.
Hey, Anna.
Hey, thanks for that, Melissa.
Thanks, Melissa.
Our production guru.
What a great week I've had. I'm going to be bold and just start first.
Okay.
I had a joyous weekend last weekend, and I went up to my ex-partner's birthday, his 50th birthday, up at Mossman, just near Mossman Gorge on a beautiful property. We had a beautiful party with fabulous people, and my son and I went up and danced and partied and had a lovely time. And it just reminded me how important, like, my partner and I, ex-partner and I are separated, but how the family is still together and how that sense of community is still there and how important it was. And it really just was a really good feeling of, like, things move, things change, but community and the friends that you have and people that you call your auntie that might not be your auntie, but they're part of your family. It was a really beautiful weekend.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I suppose at the moment with everything going on around us, I'm having that absolute opposite feeling. And seeing mum once in 3 years is kind of a different space. But I think what we always go back to, and the beauty of this podcast series and Our Human Experience, is we're creating our own community and support.
Absolutely.
And that totally brings us to our next guest, because a sense of community, I believe, we're going to have in this podcast is going to be very strong.
You've read his book?
I've read his book.
Yeah.
Actually, my ears
that's right.
read his book.
Your ears
through
read his book.
Audiobook. So let's welcome our next guest into the studio, Jo Williams.
Hi, Jo.
How are we doing?
Hey, thanks for coming on board. So good to see you.
It's a pleasure. We've had chats offline to try and make this happen, and I'm sort of someone who goes in blind a bit each day because of the challenges I have with my memory. I just get everything locked into my diary, and then there's people that I've conversed with a month ago that I have no idea who I'm going. I'm like, I remember talking to you. Yeah, so it's good to be here.
Thanks for coming on, Jo. I mean, for me, when Claire and I started working on creating Our Human Experience, I looked at my toolkit of people that have passed me by in my life, and I had the pleasure of meeting you in a town that I love very much, and that's Moree in New South Wales. And you spoke of your journey and defying the enemy within, your very moving book that you have written. And also I'd like to tell you, you narrate as well, because I'm dyslexic and I listen to your book through my ears, through BorrowBox. We do have your book.
Ready.
I know that guy.
Yeah, that's it.
Handsome man.
So, but to let you know that BorrowBox is an amazing thing through the public library, and I went to the Cairns Public Library and I had your book, and then I was like, I struggled to read with my concentration span, and I spent the whole time walking listening to your book, and I took a lot from it. So thank you for.
I'm someone who's an audiobook person as well.
Really?
I haven't been diagnosed as dyslexic, and it hasn't even been on the conversation, if I'm honest, but I just struggle with words, just reading it just jumps everywhere and all that sort of thing. So I've never been down that conversation of it, but I get it. I'm someone who's audiobook and podcaster massively. spending hours in the car when I'm on the road. I don't listen to music much anymore. Even when I'm out running or exercising, I don't listen to music.
Really? Do you
Yeah.
podcast and run, or?
Yeah, podcast and run, audio book, all that stuff. Yeah.
Interesting.
You can podcast yourself soon and listen to yourself on this one.
I've been on numerous podcasts over the years, so I've heard my voice enough.
Yeah, I never.
So,
It's funny. I've never watched The Biggest Loser, and people say to me, "Did you watch it over and over again?" I'm like, "No, I've never watched it. I lived and felt every breath of it.
Right?
You know, like it hurt. I felt it, man. You know, like I don't need to rehash it. It's implanted in my brain. So, look, where do we begin? We have a little bit of a format, we'll call it, but it always goes off the radar and changes as it formulates. Talk about the formative years, and we'll call it that. They're life lessons, but between, birth and 15, they're the time, that's a time in your life where, so many things can happen to you in a positive way. They can make you realize as you become an adult, well, I don't want to be like that. There's so many. I mean, I've read your book. I feel that there's so much of your life's journey that made you the man you are today in those 0 to 15 years, coming from a small country town and having such a large family and also a large community around you that wasn't necessarily always blood. So could you just kind of tell us a little bit about those years?
Yeah, like, the first 15 years of my life was quite eventful. Humble beginnings with our family. Just a family, an Aboriginal family in a small community that I guess our family was quite well known because of, my mum's side of the family and then my dad's side of the family as well. So I guess I was a product of that and my my siblings as well. So, the early years were, looking back, we're talking about the first, say, 0 to 15 years, right? But looking back, the most learning I've done, obviously, is a lot after that. But you learn about what happened prior to that, right? Mm. So learning just about who I am and why I am is because of those early years. So it's always good to have. It's always good to have some type of knowledge around those, I guess, those foundation years to who we are, because the brain is something that develops over many, many, many years. And, those early years are super crucial for, I guess, in brain development, but also intelligence and everything that we have. But more importantly, in today's society, let's look at, emotional intelligence of a lot of the stuff I speak about, obviously, in communities is around challenges with people's mind, their mental health, their well-being, and then, the pointy end of suicide. So looking back, I'm starting to understand why I am the way I am, which has been a fantastic journey, and has had many ups and downs. And you can look at it from the outside and say, yeah, he had a sporting career and all that sort of stuff, but that was a lifetime ago now for me. It's what's next, and what's next really excites me because of the person that I'm growing to be, and I like that person. There was a dude there that I didn't like for a great deal of many years, So I like the guy I'm turning into. He's a guy who's a lot. He's got a solid foundation in who he is and why he is.
That's beautiful, and that is a really big part of our life, isn't it? We go to school and we learn facts and figures and how to add up and read a book or whatever, but the learning really comes through life. So, but in those years, in those early years, you were one of how many people? How many children, I should say, sorry?
In my household, there was my 2 younger sisters and an older brother, and then I've got other siblings that didn't live with us as well. And then, my brother lived with us until we moved to Wagga. So I was born in Cowra, raised in Cowra till I was 10-year-old, and then we moved to Wagga. My older brother didn't come with us in Wagga, so he didn't live with us. And then and I had, another older sister that didn't live with us as well, and it was, but we're family.
Yeah.
It's like the one brilliant thing with Aboriginal families that we talk about kin families, and we don't have like the whole conversation of, is that your half brother or your half sister? That's just a completely foreign narrative to us.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it because we just have family, and looking at the kin systems and structures that we've had for thousands and thousands of years has been broken down now with the challenges that we've been living in the last 200 years around one mum, one dad, and the direct family unit that you have. Like we, as First Nation people, we had multiple mums and multiple dads,
And aunties
and
uncles.
and aunties and uncles, and who were all of our leaders. So that created a real solid foundation, which again talks to a lot of the work that I do now is around secure attachment. And a lot of what we struggle with later in our lives is because of the way that we were treated unknowingly in the early years of our lives.
Totally agree. I mean, with you saying that, I know Cowra quite well, just being out in that direction for a few years, living in, you probably know the little town. I went out there nannying at Nevertire when I was 21. So I caught a bus from Geelong and ended up in Dubbo and got picked up by a truck and ended up in Nevertire, a town of 101 on 20,000 acres. So it was a big change for the Geelong girl that wanted to find her own path in life. So I quickly learned about First Nations people. I think that's when I started to get an understanding about community and country town living. So when you say Cowra, as much as, coming from such a small town, everyone knows your business, and which can be awesome at times.
Has its challenges.
Yeah, but then it has its challenges. So, for me, looking in, and like you sort of alluded to that by saying, you're an exceptionally talented football player from a very young age. And the thing that I think impressed me most about your mother was the fact that she was all about having you educated. And that's a standout with you, Joe. And I'd just like to, just to sort of let our listeners know how that's helped you in your life by having your mum watch your back. And, many clubs were after you to play footy, and you were talented and spotted at a really young age, which, was it 11 you were spotted?
13 I signed my first scholarship contract.
Incredible.
There was numerous clubs that weren't ringing the old home telephone that was on the wall, and mum and dads that we're all sitting around listening to, but yeah, and I won't just say mum, because like dad played a huge part in that as well, because dad played in the NRL before me. So he knew that it could last 5 years or 5 minutes. Right. And he too was, around the importance of an education. Like the one thing that I'm super grateful for out of anything that I did with sport was the fact that my first contract that I signed paid for my entire schooling. From year 7 to year 12, which paid for my entire schooling, which put me on a pathway to do what I do now. Right. It gave me an education, a vocabulary, tools to equip me to be able to go and debate, have conversations, and hold intelligent conversations in the right pockets that I need to, right? Because mum and dad identified that it was important to be educated in both worlds. Whilst I was a First Nation man, Wiradjuri Walgaloo man, Aboriginal man, who grew up always knowing that I was Aboriginal, but I didn't fit in either world because I was too black to be white and too white to be black. I didn't fit, right? So it was like, oh yeah, you're Aboriginal, but you're not like one of the real ones, right? And I was like, well, what are the real ones, right? And just because I didn't dance and speak language and things like that doesn't mean that I wasn't proud of who I was. It just means that the generations before me had all of that stolen away from them. Let's not say had it lost. We had it ripped from our grips, right? So mum and dad knew that it was important to be educated in both worlds, which, and again, going down the pathway of playing footy and living in Sydney for a number of years, caught in this big system, caught in this world that wasn't particularly culturally safe back then. I had to go down and thankfully play out my career there, but then not find out my identity in the behaviors that I have with my identity too much later in my life. Like, again, I was in this system that I didn't fit. Right? It wasn't, you know, it is celebrated and talked about now, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't then. And there were racial remarks within my team. You know, it wasn't a culturally safe space. So you just fit where you need to, right? And then like the true healing that I found, and for those who listen, and we haven't really, I guess, addressed the elephant in the room of why I do what I do, is that I've lived with suicidal ideation for a number of years in my life and struggled with bipolar disorder and different challenges with my mental health. Voices inside my head that talk to me every single day and tell me that I'm worthless and that I'm no good and that, you know, I don't deserve to be here anymore. Living the world, the relatively new world, in that educated world, gave me tools, yeah, but learning about who I am has been my biggest healer. Learning who I am culturally has been my biggest healer for different reasons, but it helped me to feel safe in who I am now. Right? There were many times in my life I searched deep inside myself and I didn't like who I was, but now I'm comfortable in that person.
Absolutely. And I mean, Joe, for me, I mean, you've played, you know, football, boxing, but I always, if we're sort of looking at that space of where you grew up, you know, the footy that you played as a child, and I'm sure you could be quite descriptive on the ovals you've played on, you know, in country New South Wales and further afield as a child, and the community that got involved in you know, the canteen, the coaches that were there forever and a day as volunteers, looking back, and then also recognising that you were quite sheltered in a sense in those small communities, and then all of a sudden for you being thrust into the spotlight and into a bigger city where, you know, there is more judgment, there are more people, and you've got to find your feet and literally, and being someone that felt already sort of in the middle, if you'd like to say, like you said, you know, well, are you Aboriginal? You know, who is, you know, how do you identify individually? And I mean, living in Moree for 18 years, I was educated every day in that. You know, there are people that elders that I sat with on many occasions, and then being on Reconciliation Council as well was a massive eye-opener for me, and hearing stories of time and past and then dreams of the future. And I think you could probably, your dreams for the future and looking back at your past, what do you feel in that space with reconciliation and unity? I mean, there are words that get thrown around all the time, but with your journey with the mental health space and, you know, is there a connection to sport with head injury? I mean, I'm sure you've got a strong opinion. And then I always, you know, with yourself, I go, man, he went into boxing then, you know, like, and I
doesn't make sense, does it? But I didn't learn about that stuff till obviously, you know, I say that boxing literally saved my life.
Yeah, I get it.
Because it taught me how to fight mentally and emotionally, but it also had some damages into what it did too, you know, like structurally.
Yeah.
So it didn't particularly make sense, but I wouldn't, you know, it's a lot of things. It's the years of being knocked around the head on the footy field too. Like it's just the rattling of the brain inside the skull that has the damage. But I guess in formulating in what you were talking about, like there's many different directions that we could go in that. But when we talk about, you know, things like the relationship in the country, right? The relationship in the country, and you mentioned divide, and you mentioned reconciliation and those things. Like for me, I've done some and said some things and been part of different movements around the place over the years that people have said I've been divisive. I've been divisive for the reconciliation process. If I'm honest, I don't even use the word reconciliation. I don't engage with any of that sort of stuff. I don't even use the word, because to reconcile is to heal a broken relationship, right? Let's be honest. We are so divided in this country that there's never been a relationship to even learn. We've only learned about non-Indigenous Australia and the way of life for 200 years. You guys haven't learned about us yet. And that's what I don't talk about reconciling. I talk about building a relationship, right? We need to build a relationship and a relationship's a two-way street. Like, think about it. If you've got a marriage or a relationship that you're in, it's a two-way street. Otherwise, it don't work, right? If the pendulum swings too hard to one side, things break down, right? And this is why it's been a process of assimilation over 200 years, and the fact that we're starting to garner a voice that is largely being spoken about in your circles, not mine, because we've spoken about these conversations for 200 years, right? But to unite a very divided country as it is, I'm like, when people call me divisive, I'm like, man, where have you been?
Yeah.
Like it's never been united.
Yeah.
We got to start having real conversations, truth-telling conversations about what happened, how it happened, where it happened, when it happened. From Moree, look at the Mile Creek massacres.
I know.
Like these things happened all over the country.
Yeah.
Right. And for non-Indigenous people, we have to start having the conversation and say, you are a direct relationship to that, from that. You may not have done it, but your ancestors did it.
Joe, within you saying that, I mean, over the years, listening to many conversations.
And again, I've got to say, I'm not pointing the finger at anyone.
No.
That's not what it's about. It's about addressing the truth, the elephant in the room. Let's address it.
Exactly. I mean, I had conversations with people in Moree on a number of occasions where I would say, well, we'll be talking about the land, and how there's massive farming land out there, and a lot of that was developed by a lot of people coming out of the missions that are allowed out of top camp and bottom camp there, and saying it's a 40-degree temperature a large majority of the year, and a lot of people were chained to tractors and ploughed the land. And I had that direct conversation with other people in community, and they felt very uncomfortable about me saying that. And it was just like, it was like, that's what happened. And I all of a sudden you had all these uncomfortable people all around, and I'm like, well, why aren't we talking about this? Because you're talking about social problems going on in the community. If we can't go back to the whys, how can we fix anything or try and understand the emotion that's attached with that? Moree is an incredibly diverse town and has such a large community of Aboriginal Gamilaroi people, and they're very proud. And a lot of them are very educated too, which I'm very proud of, to know some of those people. I mean, Olive Munro, and there's so many people that I know there's been connections in your life with.
Hugely connected with the Moree community, Uncle Al and Auntie Jenny, have known my family. Like I'm related to Auntie Jen and all the family, So I'm super connected with a lot of the mob up there. And again, like we look at different challenges in different communities and social issues. It's all a direct relationship, whether we like to call it or we don't. It's all a direct relationship from challenges that have happened in our past. And then every single person has built coping strategies to get out of challenging environments, right? And now what we're seeing play out in today's society is coping strategies through alcohol and drugs and violence, which is, again, we need to change that narrative and not look to coping strategies to escape what's going on. Let's look at coping strategies to actually address what's going on within our mind, within our family units, So it's a very big conversation, probably too big to go on here for the next however long. But I'm real proud of so many of our community that are doing the work. We're doing the work in addressing different challenges, and there's stack loads of non-Indigenous people too who like to sit down with us. Right? It ain't about us sitting with you anymore. It's about you sitting down with us and trying to learn about our ways. We are all a product of our environments that have been learned, right? Every single person, every single family. So it's about addressing different challenges that we have within those communities.
So, Joe, I did read your book, and thank you very much for writing it. I think the message that comes through it is loud and very powerful, and you should be very, very proud of it. I know that it is a direction that you feel very connected to. It's not specifically talking about First Nation people or the issues that we're talking about now. It is, however, your strength and your resilience that you've gained through your life to be a pillar and be someone who's prepared to talk and stand up and talk about the First Nation issues, but also the mental health issues. So I wanted to sort of wind back slightly and say there were obviously some pivotal, very influential people in your time, and that allowed you to have that voice or have that maturity to have this voice. Can you speak about any of the main mentors coming through, not just NRL, but also the boxing scene?
Yeah, I've been lucky that I talk a lot about, I did a post on social media recently about exposure, and what exposure means to different people. But I've been lucky that I've been exposed to some brilliant people, brilliant minds, and people who are, fantastic leaders in what they do. I can't go past mum and dad, like there are obviously different challenges that we all have within our family units. And whilst I take every single experience that I ever had as a lesson, right? Either something to do or something not to do. And again, I'm not ratting on family or anything like that, but we all have our challenges, right? Everyone has that. And again, learned behaviors over many generations. But, mum and dad did the absolute best for me, for me, with the tools that they had, and I am who I am today, largely because of my upbringing. People talk about, Joe, you do this, you do that, you're a good person. And I just say, purely, I was raised well.
Yeah.
That's what I put it down to, and I'm thankful for that. And I was always a mummy's boy, and mum would travel hours on hours to take me to different trainings and so forth. And then post footy career, when I was boxing, and then dad was later my boxing coach, that brought me even closer to my dad as well. And again, because there is elements of us that are very similar. So we clash on a lot of things. But at the end of the day, like, we've had conversations that go, we're gonna do this more. We're gonna have these raw and honest conversations more, and call each other out on things. Right. So mum and dad have been pivotal in who I am. And some obvious mentors and leaders that I've had throughout my life. Arthur Beetson signed me as a 13-year-old kid, who took me then down to Sydney to live at his house, and I lived with him and his partner at the time for a couple of years, which was a brilliant experience for me, because I realised how much I actually was a mummy's boy, and I had to then clean for myself and look after myself in different ways like that. So Arthur was brilliant, and he's like a real second father to me, and it absolutely tore me into bits when I got the phone call that he passed away. And also another guy who was, funny enough, I didn't know at the time that they were actually good mates, Johnny Lewis, who was then my first boxing coach. And talking to Johnny, and Johnny wrote the foreword in my book. Talking to Johnny, he said, Joe, when I very first met him in a cafe in Erskineville when I was playing at South at the time, he said, Joey, I've known about you for a lot of years, because of Arthur and because of another man that he was so fond about, a guy called Chickamore, through the footy circles. But guys like Johnny, and then Billy Hussein, who was later my coach as well. Billy taught me a lot about building your own culture. And I'm not talking about, the cultural practice that we've had for thousands and thousands of years as Aboriginal people. I'm talking about behaviors and the people that you hang around, and not letting people hang around you who don't have similar thought processes and similar negative behaviors, things like that. So some real people who have been fantastic mentors to me that have helped shape me. But I say this in a non-egotistical way, is that I always get asked, who's your greatest influence? And I have to say, it's that little person that sits inside me and talks to me every day. Right? Every single person of us has that little boy or that little girl that sits inside us, that knows right and wrong, that gets confused, that is alerted around different things that we are challenged by. Right? It's learning to trust that little person more. It's learning to trust that little person, because that little person's got your back before anyone does. I just heard a fantastic quote, and it was actually by American rapper Tupac Shakur. It was an old rapper, an old quote that he said. He said, "Fear is stronger than love," because you've got people who say that they love you, but in an instant they'll wipe their hands on it if a certain time of fear is placed into their life. If a fear of losing something else, loyalty goes out the window. So it's learning to trust that little person, and again, a chapter in my book talking about the little boy that lived inside me and my dad, how he goes, if you're walking down a dark corridor, it isn't about trying to kick the door down to be a strong vibrato, as a man. It's about grabbing that little boy's hand and saying, you know what, we can do this together, and it's all right if you're scared, because I'm scared too. And they're the conversations that we need to have with ourselves around the challenges where we beat ourselves up so much, right? We look at what's fact and what's sometimes thought, right? The fact is not necessarily lines up with what we're feeling, right? And then it's about grabbing that little boy or the little girl's hand and saying, let's have a look at what's the fact here. And what's the thought around different things? Fact or feeling. I always say that. Let's differentiate fact or feelings. Grab that little person inside you and say, okay, what's the fact here of the situation? And what are we feeling about it? Because a lot of the time they don't line up with each other.
No, not at all.
So true.
I mean, within you saying that, and I hear you speak of your dad, and he is part of who you are physically. Like that little person in there has been, he's part of your soul and, your heart. So reading your book, Joe, you talked about in Wagga, the gym, and, you did a lot of really amazing community work through there. Can you just take us through a bit of that part of your life and how that has taken you where you are today?
Yeah, I looked at, and again, for the people who don't know, struggled with an inner dialogue for a lot of years. Inside my head, that second guessed, questioned, doubted every decision that I made, spoke to me extremely negative. And the only way that I could silence what I did was go down the path of pushing it away with alcohol and drugs, right? And then when I got sober 16 odd years ago, I had to find tools to manage that. Now, when you look at all the tools that I was doing to manage that, it was about doing things for others, right? And when we do things for others, and these are the tools that I was using as a 13, 14, 15-year-old as well, right? It wasn't just about silencing what was happening through substance. It was about constantly trying to do things for people. And whether it was charity events, whether it was volunteering, whether it was just carry someone's shopping bags, right? It's about trying to lend a hand for people. Now, when you look at all of those behaviors are and were aligned to values, right? And when you look at the values, everything that I do is associated with values. Values around love, care, respect, humility, compassion. When you look at those values and you implement values into your life and you start to center values in your behaviors, you start to realize that as a collectivist people, as First Nation people, collectivist people, Indigenous peoples around the world, we're always about doing things for others rather than ourselves firstly and foremostly, right? So when we did more for others in our community, you know, whether it be cooking meals or whether it be, you know, hunting for other families and, you know, and sharing and things like that, when you're doing things for others, you realize that it has a profound impact on you, but it also, it's like the more you give, the more you receive anyway. Right. So a lot of my life has been about giving. And that, whether it was through the work that I was doing in the gym, you know, charity work, whether it was training people, you know, my gym in the early days, it was a place for me to train and prepare for my fights, but it was also a place for people to come to get a bit of support and some mentoring around some stuff as well. So that's how a lot of that done. And you know, to this day, you know, a lot of the work I do with kids and with parents and just people in general, parents ring me all the time and say, what can I do to my boy or my girl? They're just so isolated, they just stay in their room. I say, get them around people. Get them around people once they, you know, whether it be volunteering, whether it be, you know, feeding the homeless, whether, you know, things like that, because it brings a sense of compassion. It gives us gratefulness. You know, it aligns all these values with our behaviors. And now even my older kids to my younger kids, it's about teaching them values and behaviors associated with values. And that's what I've tried to do a huge part of my life. That's why I do what I do.
Joe, I really love the fact that the gym helped you with that. And when I read in your book that wonderful in the chapter where you spoke about how when you, I don't know which gym it was and at what period, and you'll be able to enlighten me, but how when you arrived and everyone walked around and said hello to everyone before they started training or whatever, it's a really enormous part of your training was creating that loving and respectful
safe space, right?
And then you took that into your own gym. So I would have to assume you've taken that into your life on the whole. And that's a really big part of what you're talking about and how you live.
And that comes back to, you know, I alluded to it earlier, Billy is saying, talking about creating a culture, you know, and it was his gym. Like there might be 20 people there. You go around and shake everyone's hand before you start, no matter what you do. And that's just a way of, if you don't know them, introducing yourself, but also just saying, you know what, I'm here with you. And they had guys who had never had a fight before and guys who are multiple world champions going around doing that to each other. So you've got multiple world champions going up to 15, 16-year-old kids who have never had a fight before. Their first week in the gym, hello mate, how are you? How's your day? Is everything all right? Yeah, good. You know, it just creates a real beautiful bond. And again, like they're learnt behaviors, right? So we started implementing that into our gym, and you know, to this day, you know, when my dad goes into a gym, my dad still does the same.
Yeah, very powerful.
It's just about human connection, right? You know, I read a brilliant book by a guy called Johann Hari. It's called Lost Connections. It's up there with the top 3 books that I've read. And you know, I say top 3 because the other ones are around the same topics, same behaviors, and same causation of things like anxiety and depression. But Lost Connections is about how we as a people are just so disconnected. You know, we are the most disconnected we've ever been in the history of humankind. That's why we're so sick.
Yeah.
Right? As people, we've evolved from tribal people that were always together. Now we do Zooms over the phone and over the internet.
We want you to come to Babinda. We're in Babinda today, you know, just out of Cairns.
Love to get up there at one point. when we're allowed.
We'll lock
When
that
you're
in. We'll lock that
allowed.
in, mate. We'll lock
But
that
you
in.
touched on that, and you're right. We are so disconnected in a time where we've got these amazing ways to connect ourselves through Zoom and what have you, but it's pulled us away from our real proper connection, which is literally shaking someone's hand, looking them in the eye and saying, how are you?
The thing that's supposed to connect us the most in the world, our phone, is the thing that disconnects us the most in the world.
Totally.
I've said this in many conversations. You know, we're a land of fiddlers. I mean, we're always fiddling with our phone, and you know, I can be in a meeting with work, and you know, that's my biggest bugbear. Will be in some kind of meeting, and you know, everyone's prepared for the meeting, and then there's someone in the room that's just still emailing and fiddling and not giving that the respect of, you know, I'm actually talking to you, you know. So it's that whole, we've lost. I don't think our technology's moved so fast, Joe, that we haven't kind of caught up with it yet, and we haven't put things in place, as in from an etiquette kind of formulation where we're all just kind of going at it at a fast rate, and now we've had separation thrown into it as well with circumstance of COVID. So we're all sort of just floating around trying to stay sane with it all.
I'll tell you what scares the absolute heck out of me: the new metaverse.
Oh yeah,
that they're talking about.
I know.
yeah.
It's,
Like we can put on a helmet, like a virtual reality type glasses, and say that we're walking to the park and hanging out and playing with people
crazy.
when we're still sitting in our lounge room by ourselves.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, you say that, Joe, and I mean, gyms have never been quieter. You know, I go to a gym and everyone's got a headset in. And I've trained for many years at the Moree Boxing Academy, right? And that was the same.
Danny Cheatham
and Chalky, you know, those blokes are the backbone of that community. And again, Cameron Hammond had come home, Cameron would walk around, say g'day to everyone, you know, like it was just a sense of respect to each other, and everyone was included, you know. But why I say that is because the thing that I know you share very openly is your story with bipolar, and how that voice in your head talked to you a lot, and a lot of it was really negative talk in your own mind. For me, I hear that you did so much sport. So in my mind, I go, you were self-regulating to one degree, but you were pulling it down with another upper or a lower kind of influence, whether it be drugs or whatever it was. In your toolkit now to share with our listeners, if you could look back at those times in your life where you were learning about yourself, and this is kind of prevention or a lesson that you learned, is there something that you just went, I know that there is one moment and it's in your book, but are there times when you reflect and you go, you know what, I was running on a high on adrenaline with my sport, but there's something that I could have been doing? Would it be nutrition? Would it be obviously not taking certain substances? Can you take us to that place, as if you could tell yourself now what you know?
Yeah, for me, I'm also someone, and I guess with respect to the question, I'm also someone who wouldn't change a single thing, because I wouldn't be who I am now without it, right? I had to get to those places to even gain the awareness that I've got now, right? So I had to get to the depths. I had to go through the challenging times. I had to, you know, go through the highs and the lows of who I was to learn about it, right? But I think people don't talk enough about meditation. You know, meditation has been a massive key to me and just the whole process of mindfulness has been a huge process to me, right? And again, if I had those tools back then, I would have saved myself a hell of a lot of hurt. But the fact that I have those tools now is the reason I saved myself a hell of a lot of hurt, right? So what that process does is that, you know, people look at, you know, mindfulness and meditation and think hippies, right? But again, the whole process of mindfulness is about being self-aware and still, right? So why it's important for me to be self-aware and still is because of my bipolar, is I'm massively get massively manic, then I can go, ooh, there it is. You know, be careful, Joe. This is a dangerous place you can go, man, if you don't start to pull yourself back down. Or the opposite of that, the awareness of, with depression, or certainly with mine, is that, and I don't speak for anyone else, is that it's like a phase type place, right? Is that you feel not so good, and then you go a little bit lower, and then you go a little bit lower, and then, you know, things start to get down further again, and then all of a sudden you're at rock bottom, right? That doesn't go overnight, right? Or it certainly hasn't for me gone overnight. So where self-awareness has been brilliant for me is that I can identify now that I'm not quite right today. What is it? Okay, accept what it is, adjust what it is I need to do, or what's getting at me, you know, address that situation, but then get back into my exercise, get back into do what I need to do out of my toolkit to be the best version of me, right? And and again, like there was times where over the years I would be down, so I'd go and, you know, smash myself of a weekend, and then you're down even further.
Yeah.
And then you're telling yourself that I'm challenged by what I'm going through in my mind. All right, come on, let's go and have a beer and just forget about it. You know, like it's the compounding of those type of behaviors that happen over a progressive amount of time. So self-awareness, I probably wish I had a lot more self-awareness, and I listened, right? I wish I listened a lot more, right? Because as young people, we think we know it all, especially as a young footy player. There were things that I thought I knew about. I knew about football more than my coaches knew about football, you know, in younger grades and stuff like that. And that may have even been the case because I had a lot of dud coaches. But the fact that I didn't give myself the best opportunity bit me in the ass later. Right? So whilst I'm then upset and kicking stones about what the coach says, if I just learn to accept, listen, and just implement that, then I'm going to put myself into a better position. You know, so and the challenge with it all is that, yeah, I was lucky enough to play footy at a decent level, and then, you know, and then boxed and won a few fights. But, you know, I could have and should have done a hell of a lot better, but it was my attitude that stopped that.
Yeah.
Right? I'm lucky now that I can pass on those tools, those experiences to my kids. And again, like, it's just because I don't want you to make the same mistakes as I do. I ain't trying to tell you what to do. You do your way. At the end of the day, I'll be wiping your tears up in 10 years' time. Or we can just bite the bullet and start to listen a bit more.
Yeah, that's so true.
Very wise.
That's so true. So, Joe,
my dad's probably sitting there laughing at those comments.
As all our parents are.
Every parent does. I was sitting there listening to you, thinking about my 16-year-old son and going, oh, yeah, we know. They all know way more than you. I remember saying to him one day, going, do you realise that I've lived about 30 more years than you, and I've learned a few things. Yeah, but they all come round. They'll come round. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I mean, for me, Joe, what excites me about you is that you're so open about your lessons in life and those falling down and dusting off again and just getting up again and then dusting off again, like literally. And for me, I want to know what Joe's doing next. Like where, what is it that's powering you into the future to share? What are your plans? Can you take us there a little bit?
I don't know if I can. No, of course I can. I'm always working. I'm always thinking and creating. Don't worry about that.
I see that.
But for me, COVID, the whole lockdown period has been really challenging for a lot of people, and I get why and I understand why. But for me, I unreservedly say that the whole lockdown period has been the biggest gift in my life, right? I've realized, confronting statement coming up here, I've realized that I've been a father for 16 years, but a dad for 12 months.
Wow.
Wow,
Right.
Joe, that's powerful. Huh.
Whoa, I don't know what that was. I just nearly nearly had some tears. Whoa. Um, because like, and again, like these are conversations that I have with my dad.
Yeah.
And it's like, Dad, I was, and I'm not, and there's no shade here because I've had these conversations out with my dad and I've spoken about them before. I'm like, Dad, there's some things that I wasn't particularly appreciative of growing up, right? And I'm not going down the path of abuse or anything like that. I'm not going down that path because my parents loved me with the best tools that they had. And I said, Dad, but I get it. Because Dad lost his dad at 9. So no one taught him how to be a dad. He didn't learn how to be a dad. And he's just going through his life the best way he knows how with the tools that he had, right? And me, this is again speaking from a male perspective. I was doing those same behaviors, right? And I said, well, this is the time I draw the line in the sand because I'm not gonna repeat it because I don't want my kids doing the same thing. I want to, when there were tears and there were, some arguments back and forth and so forth. But these are what I alluded to earlier, the conversations that we need to have, right? And I said, I'm not going to be the dad that doesn't hug his kids, that doesn't kiss his kids, that doesn't tell his kids how much he loves them, because there's too many kids out there that have never had that, right? And I don't know if you've got it or you've read it. No, I haven't got it here. A book called Dear Son. Right? I'm one of the contributing authors to that, and it's a book of First Nation fathers writing letters to their kids, right? And I go back to the original statement of in the early years of my 2 oldest kids, it was when I was playing footy and when I was partying and taking drugs, right? And then I get sober, and the process of trying to iron out what's going on in your head as it is with that. And then I go through like relationship breakdowns and then I'm not living in the same state as my kids, to then not seeing my kids, to then having another relationship with another child that broke up within the first 12 months, right? Looking back at that, I was pointing the finger at everyone except me. Like I'm the common theme involved with both things here. Maybe it's my behaviors, right? And then the pandemic hit, and then then I separated from that relationship. Now, yeah, I wanted to be a good footy player, everything, whatever, all my life. But more than anything, I want to be a good dad. But I didn't know how to be it.
Yeah.
Right? Now, and then I get my two other kids, and that's when I'm boxing, everything's going good. And then I'm living overseas, where I'm going over a month at a time over to America and then come back to Australia. So I'm in and out of my kids' lives again, right? And then the pandemic hit and I'm forced to stay home. And my partner, Courtney, who's the most gentle thing in the entire world, right? She works in childcare, so she had to go to work. So I'm forced to stay home with my kids and homeschool and organize lunch and morning tea and nap time around meetings. And I'm like, this is quite confronting.
Your eyes went really large then. Your eyes went really large.
This is quite confronting. I don't know how to do this. And this is really, really tiring. And I go, women do this shit every day and absolutely nail it. And I'm like, whoa, and out of that has come a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful relationship with my youngest one, because like when we talk about secure attachment and early developmental stages with our brain, like you look at a lot of families, mum's the sole carer. I'm not saying all families, but mum is the main carer. When they get sick, they go to the mum. Like my little girl comes to her dad. And I love that. And I love that. And if anyone who follows me on social media, you'll understand exactly who I'm talking about. The little wild one. And again, that conversation, that narrative, both my girls are absolute fire, right? A 15-year-old girl and a 4-year-old girl, absolute fire. And people are like, well, you know, what are you going to do if they get with a footy player? Because footy players don't have the world's best rap, right? What are you going to do if they get with a footy? I said, I don't care who they get with, because if they are strong enough to handle those girls, good luck to them, right? Because my girls are staunch, mate. And they're going to cause a hell of a lot of headaches, because a good friend of mine, she said to me, if you've got a girl who'll stand up to her father and don't take no crap off her brothers, you got a girl who ain't going to take any shit off anyone.
True enough.
Right. And I'm all right with that, because of the world that we live in now, with abuse and violence in homes and even, you know, coercion around different things. I'm happy that my girls will be able to look after themselves, you know?
Definitely.
Beautiful.
It's, you know, within you saying, you know, you've been a father for really now looking at what's happened and being thrust upon us as a planet, not just a country, like a planet.
And there's a difference between being a father, someone who's a father, and someone who's a dad.
Yeah.
As well, right? Like people father kids, and then people who are a great dad to kids.
Yeah.
That's two very different people of who I was. Right. And I'm open and honest about that, because, you know, that's me learning too.
I want to say something too, which is, it's a really interestingly positive thing. I love total respect for anybody, and everyone should find the beauty and the joy in what we're going through now with the COVID, because absolutely what you just said, there are a ton of parents, male or female, mum or dad, auntie or uncle, that have been thrust into situations that they never had planned for. And not just at home, but in the workplace, all these things. And these new challenges, everything you said, Joe, or every challenge makes you stronger, wiser, and more tolerant, hopefully. And so
I think one thing that's come out of all of this is that there's families that are spending a hell of a lot more time with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But on the flip side of that is that there's families who are struggling more, who are spending more time with each other. Right. So even there's I know of a number of relationships that are broken down is because we don't work 9 to 5 anymore. We work 7 to 8 when we're still, you know, looking at emails and so forth. So the fact that we're in each other's hair a lot, we actually had to show attention to each other. Hang on a minute, that's not the guy that I married. Hang on a minute, that's not the girl that I married. You know what I mean? So you know, and then there's this the frightening reality of the relationship with alcohol that we have in this country.
Yes, yeah.
Right, where people are locked up at home and people weren't allowed to go to work, but they were allowed to go to the bottle over.
Yeah.
Like that speaks volumes, absolute volumes to the culture of a country, when you're allowing people to drink as a coping mechanism and not work.
Or go exercise.
Or go to the gym or exercise, right?
Yeah. It's crazy.
We're the fattest, most unfit, unhealthy people that we've been in the history of humankind.
Yeah. And we have so much food on this planet. You know,
that's the thing, right? Is that and the conversation again around First Nation people, and they were like, you know, how can First Nation people be vegetarian or even vegan? Like, you guys lived off the land, like you lived with animals and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, but we didn't have a supermarket to go to every day.
No. Yeah.
You know, so we grazed. If you ever have a look at the old photos of a lot of our old people, like, they were all long and lean and absolutely ripped. It's not because they were starved. It's because what we ate was good for us. It was nourishing our bodies.
Absolutely. And we live in the most Australia is just the most incredible country, and you know the food that is there with bush tucker is, you know, I've been privileged to be in Circle and eaten some most incredible things that I never thought that I would try. But even just we were talking to a scientist earlier this morning, and we're talking about our gut health, and we're talking about spices and how, you know, we have so many preservatives in foods and how we can flavour up foods. And I mean, you know, within Australia, our spice collection of bush tucker is just incredible, and we haven't really tapped into it enough. We've planted.
And like it probably talks to the ideology of white supremacy. How on earth could Aboriginal people have sustained and what they did for so long?
Yeah.
When they know less than us, far less than us. They're just primitive and they just roam around the bush. All they did was invent a stick. Like the world's most stupid conversations that I've ever heard when dealing with racists, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm sure there are, and a long way to go, but I've got to say hats off to you for using, want a better way, but taking the opportunity to speak out when you've had focal points, you know, accepting awards or times where you've been in the public eye and you've stood up. You haven't shied away, you've stood up, and it's really commendable, it's very powerful, and the next path that you're taking is this even more elephant in the room, as you said, you know, mental health and suicide. To stand up as a public figure and say, yep, this is real, this is what we need to do, walk with me, because I've been there and I'm prepared to share my knowledge with you. So sitting around the table with Joe is what we need to do on so many topic levels.
And there's many thousands of more knowledgeable and wise people than me out there. You know, it's I said to them, like, we had a corroboree in Wagga, and it was blasted all over social media, and it was the first one in 150 years, first known public corroboree in 150 years. And the local mayor was there, and he said, "Joe, this is brilliant." And I said, "Thanks for coming." And he goes, "I wouldn't have missed it." He goes, "You know," I said, "This is a seat at our table. You know, this is what we mean about coming and sitting with us. You know, as I said before, we've learned about you for 230 plus years. You've never learned about us. Like, there's nothing to be scared of. You know, and again, it's just the same narrative that gets spoken about on many mainstream channels. You know, that it's that same negative narrative that we hear and we see around different things. So it's about just meeting people on their terms, not on your terms, and just trying to understand. You know, and that goes back to the old values that I speak about. You know, being compassionate, being loving, being caring, like all of that. And again, so many people say, you know, it's fantastic what you do around the country, Joe, and talking about, you know, your story and all of that sort of stuff. And I was like, I don't just talk about my story. I use my experiences as a way to get people in, as something to connect to, right? But what I actually do is talk about the old stories, talk about the old dreaming stories, and people think that they're just pretty little picture books that we learn about in primary school, right? But people don't realize that those stories were here and around for thousands and thousands of years as a means for people to be well and look after each other, right? All of those stories, no matter whether it's Tiddalik the frog or how the birds got their colors, or, you know, all the different stories. I say to people, the one thing that we can do as a nation, as an individual, is go out and learn the story of your area. So wherever you guys are now, start learning the story of that area, right? Because I guarantee you those stories will have elements and values of looking after country, looking after each other, looking after yourself, being respectful, making sure that we're sharing, making sure that we're compassionate, making sure that we're loving. You know, all of those old stories, they weren't for pretty little picture books,
No.
right? All of those stories are about looking after yourself and making embedding values in your behaviors.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think it's really interesting you say that, Joe, because I remember I'd lived in Moree for 10 years and I was sitting down with some friends in Moree and their children, and we started talking about totems. And I looked at one of the kids and I said, "Well, what's your totem?" And they're like, "It's the goanna." And I'm like, "I didn't know that. I didn't know that." And I'm like, "Why don't we have goannas all over the Maney? Like, what's going on?" And then I walked out and there was some flag of some description about something. And I'm like, there's nothing to identify the totem in this town anywhere. And there wasn't. So I went on this web page. And at that time we had a butcher shop in Moree with a lot of local born and bred people of all different backgrounds. And I walked in and I said, "Right, boys, what's the totem?" Dead silence. And I'm like, oh, I was so annoyed. I was like,
The thing, like,
so annoyed. And it was
no
like,
one's learned about us.
that's what I
No.
mean. That was what it was, a period. And from that day forward, I said to myself, I need to understand and listen more and ask questions and put myself in the right circle. And I went out of my way to say, because I'd fallen in love with Moree and Moree had given me so much. And, you know, I remember we sponsored the Boomerangs for many years, and I remember being that girl, that Anna Winter. She off tap, eh? She's out there. Just a big sign, you know, just part of it. And because I saw I came to Moree and I didn't see colour, right?
Yep.
And I say that so openly. I heard a very incredible Moree woman one day at the town hall, and she said they were trying to bring Big W to town, and she said she started the Aboriginal Employment Strategy, this lady. She's one of the founders, and I was saying, when you employ in someone and it doesn't work out, what do you say? And it made me really think, because she said, do you say, if you employ an Aboriginal person, I'm never going to employ an Aboriginal person again because they didn't work out? Or when a white person doesn't work out, do you say, oh, I'm never going to employ a white fella again? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. I took it. And then when I went into business myself, and I had 2 24-hour service stations, one in Inverell and one in Moree, I had the most incredible, life-changing experience. It was a privilege to be able to employ someone, firstly, but then to give opportunity in community to employ people that had never been offered a job before. Changed my world. And to this day, you know, I still get, oh, you're really tough, but, you know, I learned heaps. Like, you gave me a go, you know, like you gave me a go. I didn't care where you came from. You know, I used my gut again. I used my instinct. And it's fascinating because I've totally gone off track. But why I say this is community and conversation and listening. I listened at that town hall meeting and the room went dead quiet when she said that. And I was like, you go, girl. You know, and she spoke truth. She spoke truth, and nearly everyone in that room was a business owner. So I just thought, like yourself, she was another person in community that, you know, she just spoke her truth, and it resonated with me, and then it affected so many people's lives because I was open to, you know, employing people from all walks of life, where the conversations, I'm not saying all, but there were conversations like that. You know, oh, that black fella didn't work out, and you know, oh gosh, I get in trouble for saying black fella, white fella. But honestly, Missy Higgins, what's one of my favourite songs? Black fella, white fella, doesn't matter what's your colour. I mean,
We have to just start looking at people as people.
Exactly.
You know,
But that's what you know, having that conversation in a town that's so charged by the past. It's so charged by the past. It kind of was like, again, having that open conversation and also listening. I listened and was like, I just had it was a moment that changed my life forever.
I just want to pick on up on what you just said.
Yeah.
That town is so charged from the past. The whole of Australia.
Of
Oh,
course.
yeah.
The whole of Australia is charged from the whole of the world.
Yeah.
Charged
The world,
from the
man.
past.
The world.
The whole motto I want
True.
is just get over yourselves. Like, seriously, get over yourselves. Sit down.
Again, it's like I said it earlier. It's the ideation of white supremacy.
Yeah.
Ideology of white supremacy. Thinking you're above someone else because of your color.
Yeah.
Right? Racism isn't the problem. White supremacy is the problem. Right? Racism is a product of that. Right? And that's what the challenge is.
Look, honestly, we could talk all day, and there is so much to cover. I'm not really sure we're going to solve the problems of the world.
I heard just on that. I listened to a podcast recently, and looking at conversations. Right, it was a Joe Rogan podcast with Jewel. Remember? Have you listened to the podcast with Jewel?
No, I haven't.
Remember the singer Jewel?
Yeah.
That was I told you earlier. I'm a podcaster, right? So I'm constantly on different podcasts and stuff like that. The podcast with Jewel went for about 7 hours.
Wow.
And I listened to it in about 4 or 5 different sittings, but you just could not stop it. I started listening to it at 8 o'clock at night, and at midnight I'm trying to put myself. I'm struggling to go to sleep, it's struggling to keep my eyes open. I'm like, I just want to keep going, mate. If you and again, the conversations can just go forever when you're having a good time, right? Yeah. Mate, do yourself a favor and listen to that. Listen to that one.
That's my day tomorrow. I was wondering what I'm going to do tomorrow, actually.
Joe Rogan and Jewel.
Joe Rogan.
I
love his podcast.
I live in a house.
Her story is incredible.
Really?
Mate, incredible. I just thought she was a singer.
Well, you're not just a football player.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not just a person. You ladies aren't just what you do, mate, her story just absolutely knocked me off my feet.
Yeah, great. Wow.
Incredible.
Impressive.
That's it. And I mean, the thing is, Joe, this is why Claire and I, we have our own individual journeys, which I can't wait to share with you as well, because we've created a community of people coming on our human experience that
amazing.
I'm sure that you'll get a lot of joy out of. And I just want to say thanks for giving us some time today. And we really appreciate you as a human. We talk about we're all human, but like you said, we see each other who we are individually, and we all have a story. And I think if anyone out there has the opportunity, and Joe, could you just share a bit of where people can go and purchase the book on your website or your social media platform? Can you give us a bit of info?
Yeah, firstly, the book Define the Enemy Within. People think it's a book about my story, all of that sort of stuff. It's a book that's super relatable for all people, no matter who you are, where you're from. I've had contact with people from all over the world. I'm from about 7 or 8 different countries around the world that have read my book, and thankful that they have. But whilst they all weren't rugby league players, they weren't boxers, they weren't even Aboriginal, it's the commonality of struggle, and I think the most important part of that book, when you read it, you'll understand, is the back section of that book, where I talk about what I do to keep me well. And there's been numerous people that I say, go over that section again, right? Just have a look at different things that you can do, which is not about just me, it's about everyone and who can implement these simple tips into your life. And that's the most important stuff about it's all helping people, and I'm lucky that it's had a couple of reprints now and still going strong. And someone ordered 50 the other day from our website. So where you get the books, you get them from our website, which is www.joewilliams.com.au, and you can follow me on socials on @JoeWilliams_TEW for the Enemy Within. So @JoeWilliams_TEW and joewilliams.com.au.
So, Joe, we'll actually pop all those details on our website as well and attach this to your podcast. So, is there anything else that you'd like to share with what's coming up before we finish up today?
No, I'm just thankful to have conversations. Thankful to have conversations. I'm always out there. I'm always doing different things, thinking and creating. And you're trying to get it ahead of me, but you'll see in time.
Honestly, Joe, just before we when we went live to air, you were just rabbit full on writing out every minute of every moment that you had ready. What we were messing around with our technology, you were getting some ideas down on paper, and I want to know what they were.
Yeah. And we want you to visit when the borders open, when Palaszczuk says stop, go.
Come on up.
We'd love to have you in the studio in Babinda, which is incredible.
Beautiful part of the world.
And yeah, we wish you all the
What I was writing down was just my daily practice every day.
Oh, there you go.
Write down my gratitudes and write down my things that I'm manifesting.
There you go. Well done.
Thank
you.
Key to what we do is routine.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, ladies. It was an absolute pleasure.
And again, what an amazing story that gentleman has.
I know. And it's interesting because throughout that conversation within my own self and my own little mind my own little person in my head that speaks to me that he discussed. And it's true, that whole other voice. And it made me feel how we talked about conversation and open conversation, that I said things within the body of that conversation today about my experiences in community, being an Anglo woman. I don't know. Is that appropriate? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well.
It's,
What is the PC this week?
I know. And for me, it's kind of like my intention with all conversations in my past, living in a very small community, has always been to help others.
Yeah.
And some of the conversations that I've had over the years have been really uncomfortable for not just myself, but for other people. So what I took from Joe, and it was he has been a person to stand up and speak in times.
Impressive. Really impressive.
And underlying that, his intention is to help others. And that just came through so clearly with Joe.
And I also too, because when I did bring that up, I like the humbleness, because he says it's not really about me, and it's not about what I've achieved as a sports person, and it's actually about sitting down, listening, having the conversations, some of the tough conversations for our healing, not just as individuals, but as communities, as nations, as global communities. So
I mean, he's an educator.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a definite, with so many people around the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, education in a very sensitive space, if you like to call it, that probably doesn't get talked enough about, and that is suicide prevention.
Very difficult. He's doing an incredible job.
Yeah. So I just, to me, I took a lot from today about speaking about things that sometimes can be awkwardly awkward, but that that have importance to help others.
And need to be said.
Yeah. And that whole thing, again, when we've gone over this and said this in other podcasts, is that, finding support, and giving love and kindness to other people on this planet is so important.
And as a sufferer, asking for help. Finding that network, that whoever it is, whether it's a big one or just one person at the gym,
Absolutely.
that you can connect with so that you're not drowning, so that that voice
alone.
isn't too loud, so that you're not feeling alone.
Exactly. And I mean, Joe's social media is very active, his Instagram especially. So to our listeners who really want to start to get a bit of a understanding and support, social media can be used as a support. And I believe that his social media is a great support. And also
the back part of this book is an incredible pathway to healing, and it's laid out. And you just need to skim through and follow, and it's just really, really comprehensive.
Absolutely. There's tools, and I mean, that's the thing we've been talking about with many of our guests, what's in, this is part of Joe's toolkit, and he shared it, and I think that's, that's something that people, it's definitely worth a read.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great day.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Our Human Experience. You can follow us on social media on Instagram and Facebook.
ourhumanexperience.com.au.
Listen to Our Human Experience, where you can pod binge anytime you like. See you next time.
Bye.
If you have found this episode to cause you some distress, please reach out to a friend or call Lifeline anytime on 131114. 131114. Take care.